Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to take place in the second chapter in the book of Kings. There are two parts in the first king of chapters, the first of which is Adonijah's attempted usurpation, his unilateral campaign to seize the throne from his father in his moment of weakness. David is elderly and infirm, and he has not named a successor. The Israeli monarchy was still an infant institution, and there was no mechanism in motion yet for a king to name his successor. And so one of the sons, the eldest born, Adonijah, the son of Absalom, who himself tried to usurp the throne from David, sort of knows that Solomon is favorite. He deliberately excludes him and a few key other people from his coronation, but it's a mass slaughtering, mass sacrifice. Joab is there. We're going to meet him, and we'll see what happens to him in the second chapter. And one of the disgruntled high priest, Abiathar, so he does have some clout there, but he deliberately, all his brothers are there except Solomon, who is the son of Bathsheba, who through the intervention of the prophet Nathan instructs her to say certain things, and he follows in. So the scene shifts from Adonijah's mass slaughtering and sacrifice and premature coronation to the palace, where Nathan confirms what David hears from Bathsheba, and then they ultimately set in motion a plan to leave without any definitive doubt that Solomon is his successor, and he swears by oath in the second part of the chapter that we're going to read. So then we're mostly going to spend time on the action outside the palace. They were still in the palace, and King David said, "Call me Zadok the priest, and Nathan the prophet, and Benaniah son of Johanna," and they came before the king. Zadok was the two men shared the high priesthood office. Abiathar, who was since disgruntled, and he had went over to Adonijah's side, and Zadok, who was the sole high priest during Solomon. He would have been the original high priest at the temple, but Solomon does the dedication, so that part is in there. But Nathan, in addition to Gad, was perhaps the most, or probably the most prominent prophet in David's life. He is there in three key scenes. He gives him the Davidic covenant, of which we're going to read or speak about in the second chapter. And he also convicts him of his sin with Bathsheba, but then Bathsheba had grown in influence and power at the palace, so much so that Nathan gives her instructions to save her son's life. This is the third such time. And Benaniah was the son of a priest, but he was the leader of David's palace guard. He would have been the equivalent of the Praetorian head if David was the Roman emperor. So this would have been a key player missing, and now they are there. So there is muscle, there is church, and there is state in combination. He sends them to, tells Solomon to take my mule. Mule is the royal animal, and the location is Gihon, and then they're going to anoint him and make a loud noise, make everyone know. And Benaniah, the soldier, says, "As Yahweh has been with my master the king, so let him be with Solomon, and make his throne greater than the throne of my master, King David." This is a wish which will be fulfilled. Israel will reach its apex, or golden age, under the rule of David's son and successor. David fought the battles which gave Solomon, who was to reign in peace, the security to pursue an alliance-oriented foreign policy and just a commercial network, to make Israel greater than she ever was. But sadly, Israel would never be the same after Solomon. Solomon would not be able to say this to his son, or this would not be true for Solomon and his son. Then Zadok the priest, and Nathan the prophet, and Benaniah son of Johanna, and the Kereths and the Peleths went down and had Solomon ride on King David's mule, and took him to Gihon. And Zadok the priest took a horn of oil from the tent and anointed Solomon, and they blew the horn, and the people said, "Let King Solomon live." So whereas David and Saul were anointed by prophets, Samuel respectively, Nathan is there, but since the monarchy is in more institutional form, this is the first dynastic Passover. The prerogative is ceded to the priest ever since, the high priest. They take the oil and this was the anointing bomb. And they make a loud noise, loud enough that the earth is shaking, so much so that Absalom's party, who are encamped at En Rogel, hears this from Gihon. It's within earshot, and they panic. And they know that our master King David has made Solomon king, and King David did not do that to Adoniah. He took it upon himself. He thought the people needed a king, and he knew his father was weak and dying and at death's door, but while he still has breath yet, he decisively intervenes before it's too late. Better late than never, but still. Should have taken care of this a while ago. Of course, in Chronicles, the succession is a lot more smooth. And Adoniah catches wind of this, his party catches wind, and word reaches his ear. And further, the servants of the king have gone to bless our master our master King David, saying, "Let your God make the name of Solomon better than your name, and the throne greater than your throne." And the king bowed on his bed. Who was this talking? Zadok and Nathan. They returned from the feast, and they informed David this, and all the guests of Adoniah, they're frightened, and Adoniah himself, seeks refuge on the horns of the altar, the protection of which was exclusively reserved for manslaughterers. Job follows his course of action after the portion we're going to read today. And it was reported to Solomon, saying, "Look, Adoniah is afraid of King Solomon, and look, he has taken hold of the horns of the altar, saying, 'Let King Solomon swear to me today that he does not put his servant to death with the sword.'" So he's verbally submitting. He's calling himself his servant, whereas he has recently tried to usurp him as the throne. But now that he knows David has the weight of authority, and just his party was so much bigger, and all the people were acclaiming him, whereas only as a less wide window were doing the same for him. So he's seeking mercy. He knows that the gig is up, and now all he can do is beg for his life. And he was going to kill Solomon and liquidate him, and Solomon agrees to keep him alive under certain conditions. And Solomon said, "If he proves himself a worthy man, not one hair of him is going to fall to the earth, but if evil is found in him, then he shall die." So he's essentially on house arrest, and what he does to blow it all after the section we're going to cover today. Now David orders him to kill 2 people and to spare one, in addition to these are David's parting words to Solomon, his son and successor, right before he dies, and they do reveal an embittered old man. Verse 1, chapter 2, "And the days of David drew near to die, and he commanded Solomon his son, saying, 'I am going the way of all the earth, and you shall be strong and be a man.'" David is 70 years old at this time, and so he's lived a well life, and he's so infirm and feeble that he cannot generate the self-heat from his own frail body. So they have a virgin attend to him, whom he did not lay with. But Solomon was his son and successor, son by the wife of Bathsheba. She was his favorite, so that's how the dynasty would pass, because there were polygamous marriages amongst the ancient Near Eastern royals. So in Israel, the favorite wife, their son typically went. That's how Rehoboam established him. Rehoboam was the eldest born of Solomon, born before he was king. But he's going, I'm going all the way of the earth. It's just another way of saying he is now no longer going to be on the earth. He is going to die. He is going to be in one of 2 places. But because it's David, we know that he's in heaven. But he says the same thing or something similar to what Moses tells his successor, Joshua: "Be strong, be a man, have courage, have strength." If you are a king, you have to be a man. And if you are a man, you have to be a king. A man, especially more so if you are king. "And guard the charge of Yahweh your God, to walk in his ways and keep his laws, his commandments, his judgments, and his witnesses, as is written in the law of Moses, so that you do wisely in all that you do, and wherever you turn." The word wise, or some derivative of it, appears 3 times in the things we're going to cover today. And Solomon was the wisest king who ever lived. But part of wisdom is found in obedience. Now the king, as much as the commoner, was bound by the law. They were instructed, according to Deuteronomy 17, to have a portable copy at all times, so they could walk with it, just have it in their heart, because as the king went, so went the country. The microcosm affects the macrocosm, especially in the monarchical form of government. So if the king is a godly man, God-fearing man, law-obeying man, then his subjects will be too. But if the king is an idolater, literally the entire country goes astray, and just the example they set is so key and so critical. But the same thing that they are to do, so too are we. We are to keep his laws and his commands and judgments and witnesses. These all mean different things, but they are all facets and components of the law of Moses, which we are not bound by, but we still should study and try to obey, because if we are walking in the Spirit, we will not be in need of the law. But that it is wise to obey is the conclusion of Ecclesiastes. It is far better to obey what we know than to seek after that which we cannot know and we're not meant to know. So that Yahweh establishes his word, which he spoke concerning me, saying, If your sons keep their way to walk before me in truth with all their hearts and with all their souls, saying, There is not to cease a man of yours on the throne of Israel. The previous verse spoke of the Mosaic covenant. This one goes into the Davidic covenant, of which we read of in the 7th chapter of 2 Samuel, and the 17th chapter of 1 Chronicles. In it, David, what prompts it is David's desire to be the one to build the temple, and the prophet Nathan tells him, Your God is with you, your heart is good, go and do it. But then he is visited by the voice of the Almighty that night, who tells him that David is not to be the one. But even though he's so pleased that David offered to build him a house, that Yahweh gives him what he was about to offer to him. He offers him a house or a dynasty in perpetuity. His king would rule forever, because the eternal king, the Messiah, would be sprung from his loins, but also his earthly throne could last forever if the men were God-fearing men. Unfortunately, they were not. There were 20 after Solomon, I think. But Solomon set the course of the deviations and departures towards the tail end of his life, but he is still young, still at the promise of his life, and things only get better from here. Now the advice transitions from spiritual to practical, and it is bloody, and they do not paint the most flattering, rosy, or romantic picture of David, but it is part of who he was. Verse 5, And also you know what Joab son of Zerah did to me, and what he did to the 2 commanders of the armies of Israel, to Abner son of Ner and Amasa son of Jether, that he slew them, and shed the blood of battle in peace, and put the blood of battle on his belt that was around his waist, and on his sandals that were on his feet. Joab was David's principal general. He had relied on him, but Joab was a bloodthirsty man whose only principle was strength, and his honor was his only code. But he resorted to unlawful assassinations in times of peace. He had taken 2 men's military rivals, the first of which was Abner, who was Saul's key general in the Davidic and civil wars earlier in 2 Samuel. By right, David was the king, so Saul's general should have been his, but he was murdered by Joab, who also proceeded to do the same with Amasa in the 20th chapter of 2 Samuel, another potential military rival. So this was a man for whom cold-blooded murder was a routine order of business. Now, soldiers on the field, they kill, but they do not murder. Murder is distinct and different, and these men were clearly at peace, but he was so ambitious and so self-seeking and so self-serving that he was willing to shed innocent blood, and he also killed or had Absalom killed in express violation of David's order. He had also killed Uriah at the behest of his patron. So David's hands were not entirely clean, so he did not have any moral high ground to shed the one who had shed innocent blood. But Solomon's hands were clean, and he was fed up with Job at this point. He couldn't control him, he couldn't contain him. He was a necessary evil, but tolerable no more. The straw that broke the camel's back was easily that he had allied himself with Adoniah. So act according to your wisdom, and do not let his gray hair go down to the grave in peace. This would have been the wise thing to do, to liquidate the rebels as an example, to suppress all subsequent attempts. If people see such treason unpunished, they will get the idea in their head that they can disobey the king and the law, and just the whole balance goes. So it is, of course, wise to kill the man whose time had come. David couldn't kill him, but now that he was in David's shoes or position of power, get rid of this man. The ground was tainted with the innocent blood that he shed, and Joab had to go. He had served his purpose, but now he was a danger to his son, because now David, of course, will not order Solomon to order the execution of his own son, but he ultimately does when he violates his terms, as we read in the 52nd chapter. But do not let his gray hair go down to the grave in peace. So Joab is old, and David does not want him to die in his sleep. He wants him to be executed. But show kindness to the sons of Barzillai the Galdite, and let them be among those who eat at your table, for they came to me when I fled from Absalom your brother. When Absalom, the elder brother of Adoniah, the son of a daughter of a king, so they had double royal blood in them, but he tried to usurp the throne from his father, and his father was actually on the run. His rebellion got a lot further and was a lot more dangerous than his younger brother's, Adoniah's rebellion. It went nowhere fast, almost instantly and effortlessly squashed, although it may have been too late had David procrastinated any longer on something he should have set in motion long ago. But this man had given him sanctuary and refuge and comfort when he was literally on the run, in danger for his life, much as he had been when Saul was on the throne. Now Adoniah, he had slept with his concubines in the palace as an act that that was the equivalent of saying, "I am king," to sleep with the king's concubines. But let not only him but his children, let them be cared for, because they cared for me in my hour of greatest need and in my hour of maximum danger. And see, with you is Shimei, son of Gabra, the Benjaminite from Beerah, who cursed me on the grievous cursing on the day when I went to Mayahanan. But he came to meet me at the Jordan, and I swore to him by Yahweh, saying, I shall not put you to death with the sword. This Shimei, we read of his cursing during Absalom's rebellion, and David once more did not have the moral high ground to resist. The curse was ineffective, because I think Solomon says in one of the Proverbs, like a sparrow, something about a curse coming to no effect, a curse that is unmerited or invalid. Just because wicked men curse righteous people doesn't mean that the curse will fall on them. But to curse someone is a very serious thing, and to invite imprecatory consequences on them. But the curse was ineffective, but David voluntarily ceded his right to live, because he was in no moral high ground. He was on the run from Absalom because he had slept with another man's wife and killed the man upon impregnating the wife, after he resisted his efforts to be seduced by the proximity of his wife. And now do not leave him unpunished, for you are a wise man, and you shall know what you shall do to him, and shall bring his gray head down to the grave with blood. Down to the grave with blood. So the same place that Joab is going, premature death, he's going to be executed. His time had come. David said he would not put him to death, but his son is going to do what his father was unable to do because his father had too much blood. But Solomon was to establish the peace through the execution of 3 men, the other of which was Adoniah, his brother who tried to usurp the throne. So Job gets his by the tail end of the chapter, and also Benaniah, he does the killings, the 3 executions. He is and he replaces Job. He was militarily more a mediocre man militarily, but Solomon did not want another Job, a man whom his father had difficulty controlling. He couldn't have another wild dog in the field. And David slept with his fathers and was buried in the city of David. Slept with his fathers is a way of saying he bit the dust. He was over the door. He was dead. Sleeping is also, in the New Testament, synonymous with death, but he's sleeping with his fathers, the ones who came before him. Solomon is now the man of the house, the patriarch of the family, because David is with his fathers, and the city of David was the city of Jerusalem, the city that David exalted to the capital, both political and religious, of Israel. But according to Peter's Pentecostal preaching, Acts 2nd chapter, I believe the 29th verse, the tomb of David was a known location in New Testament times, but we do not know where it is today, where he is buried. But we do know that it was in Jerusalem. We just don't know exactly or quite where. And the days that David reigned over Israel was 40 years. He reigned 7 years in Hebron, and in Jerusalem he reigned 33 years. 40 years, so the same duration that the wilderness, the Exodus generation wandered in the wilderness. That's how long David ruled, and that's how long Solomon would rule, and together their reigns constitute a golden age of a united monarchy with God-fearing, God-obeying men for the most part. Their slips are recorded, but they were human just like us, but they were heroic men nevertheless, even though Solomon is ultimately a tragic figure. But the city of David was not the city of David. It had only been the city of David for 33 years. In the first 7 years of his 40-year reign, he ruled in Hebron, so the monarchy was not exactly united. It was, there was still, he ruled over Judah before he ruled over Israel, but, Jerusalem is in Judah, so that's that. And Solomon sat on the throne of his father David, and his reign was firmly established. So after some struggle, after some procrastination, after some delay, there is another king on this throne. David has died, even though he waited till the tail end of his life to name a successor. His son is going to take over and fill in where he left off, and his reign is on firm footing, and it gets a lot more firmer once these 3 executions are implemented. And but that's getting that's getting a little far ahead of ourselves. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you're here. Stay tuned until next time. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.